Well, good evening again from Glimpses Coffeehouse. We've got our friend Brian here, who is a libertarian, and I think many of us in the country are confused about what is a libertarian. We've seen people like Ralph Nader, Ron Paul ran as a libertarian a little bit. So tonight, Brian is our local expert in Solano County and Fairfield, so we brought him along. So welcome him tonight, please.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. So we want to start off. When did you become a libertarian, and why?
I think there's, first of all, there's a difference between libertarian with a lowercase l and libertarian with a uppercase L. Libertarian lowercase l, that's more of a philosophy, and you can find some Republicans, like Ron Paul, fall in that bracket. And I think I've always been in that school of thought, that philosophical approach. Over time, I used to be a registered Republican, but over time I've noticed that the Republican Party, like all parties, evolve. And the Republican Party was really evolving the wrong direction for me. It became less about libertarian principles and about more big government. I found that the two big parties that we deal with, both of them want a sizable government, but to push each of their respective issues and topics. So over time, the Libertarian Party became more attractive and more in line with my beliefs. So eventually, I took the step and I said, I'm going to re-register as a Libertarian. And now, instead of just becoming a registered Libertarian, just voting the party line, I've decided to step it up a notch and really spread the gospel, so to speak, about, hey, you always hear people, man, I wish there was a third choice when it comes to your choice of elections and politicians. And I'm out here to say, yes, there is, and let me tell you about it, and then encourage you to go check it out and research it for yourself.
Don't you find that people are frightened of too much freedom? Because isn't a libertarian a person who doesn't want any government?
Not necessarily on that second point. There's some anarchist type libertarians who would be perfectly happy without government, but I think most people we want a moderate amount of government, just the bare minimum to get things done that we have the people want done, but also that was in the framework of the Constitution. As far as people being afraid of too much freedom, perhaps some people are out there. I would say that some people haven't been exposed to too much freedom. They've been growing up in America, which arguably is more free than other countries, but is it a 10 out of 10 on terms of the freedom scale right now? I would say no. I think we're 6, 7, maybe an 8 on a good day. So trying to get people to say, hey, here's the original scope of what government should be doing, and here's what you could be doing in terms of exercising your freedoms and your liberty, is an aspect of the Libertarian Party that I'm trying to spread the word on.
Good. Thank you. What would you do for a local business if you were running for council? Mm-hmm. We've been having forums here recently with another city, Vacaville. Mm-hmm. What would you do? There's a lot of complaints about how difficult it is mm-hmm. to do business now in California, and many people are leaving. Right.
So, number one, the thrust would be to get government out of your way. If you run a coffee shop or a car repair business or a seamstress shop, I don't know anything about those. You know about coffee or a car repair and stuff like that. So I'm not going to get involved with how you run that business. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on there. My goal is to create an environment, a petri dish, if you will, where you can go ahead and establish your business, and you sink or swim based on your merits and your skill sets and your marketability to people in the community. As far as, you show up and go, hey, I want to start my business, whatever that is. Okay, let's talk. Let's have that discussion. I'm not saying you're going to get everything you want, but at least let's have that discussion. I get the vibe that people go to the government, it's like, I want to do this. And the government checks against their list and says, if it doesn't match up to their list, then you can't do it. And I think that's backwards. I think the government should say, how can I help you, small business owner? How can I help you, small, aspiring, entrepreneur? I'm here to help you, because the government works for you, not the other way around. And I think that's what's forgotten. I think talking about too much freedom, I think people forget the government works for the people. So getting back to what the city can do, I think, there's a lot of regulations. I think we need to review those regulations, and some of them, I think, are important. You know, keeping the environment clean, maintaining safe working environments, being fair and honest. I think there's justifications to some of those rules, but I think a lot of them are just nitpicky revenue generating things. You know, sign permits. Really, how, you know, is the sign really going to impact our community negatively? I think that's just a revenue play. And when we're talking $100 here and a couple $100 here, if you're a small, struggling, aspiring business, that couple $100 could make or break you every month. You know, that's rent, that's, you know, water, that's the utility bill, that's food you're taking home to your families. I'd rather have that money in the private sector doing stuff where people can benefit and stimulate the local economy rather than being tucked up in you know, municipal or county government where the case can be made it's not going to be spent efficiently. So if you come to us with an idea, say, hey, I like Fairfield, because I like Fairfield. You know, it's got great natural air conditioning. It's centrally located. It's an hour from anything, pretty much, right off the highway. It's got a lot going for it, and I don't know why other businesses have not approached here. And you know, let's advertise it. Say, hey, we're open for business. You come to me and say, hey, I want to do this, but there's this one regulation that's bothering me. Well, let's talk about it. You know, if we can, you know, if we can discuss and say, you know, for your case in that instance, we can make a waiver. You know, let's be flexible. Let's work together. The goal is to, you know, when you win, we win. You know, a rising tide floats all boats.
We've got tax measures because revenue's down, businesses are closing, people are moving out of the area, so now we're raising taxes to try and supplement that. Do you see that as a positive or a negative?
We really need to see why municipal revenues are down. And it's not necessarily because of a softer economy. The immediate issue is that the state governments have taken the liberty of transferring funds from a local municipal level and transferring them to the state level in order to shore up their own budgeting shortfalls. So that leaves us, you know, holding the bag. So the solution for me is, you know, there's a lot of sales tax increase proposals on there. I don't think if you want to increase tax revenue, raising a tax rate on something does not convey to do more of that activity. A tax generally is a negative connotation and discourage the you know, pursuing that activity. You know, you have a tax on sales. Well, people are they're not going to want to buy more product. They're probably going to buy less, if anything. You know, you have a tax on cigarettes. That's supposed to discourage smoking. If you have a tax on working, people are not going to be inclined to work more. So sales tax increases, you know, the rate increases are not the way to go. If you want to realize more revenue from your sales tax base, you need to increase the taxable base itself. You know, 5% of $1 million is more than 5% of $800,000. That's the way to approach it. So I would focus on what can we do to stimulate more purchasing and more business within Fairfield or Solano County limits, as opposed to increasing the rate. Because if now it's going to be a one-upmanship. Right now we have Fairfield with a tax increase proposal, but we have Vacaville with a tax increase proposal. The winner is going to be the Sassoon, who doesn't have a tax increase proposal. So everyone's going to run over there because we're pretty close to each other. We have choices. If you don't like the rates or the business climate of Fairfield, I can go 10 miles down the road to Vacaville where it's a different climate. There's choices we have, and I think that the rate increase, you know, neglects to factor that in. But my big issue is that with the minute we increase our revenues here with the sales tax that stays within the city of Fairfield, I guarantee you that politicians in Sacramento are going to come down and say, well, now that you have that revenue earmarked for your stuff, it won't hurt as much when we take more of your other revenue. That's the problem we have. We have politicians in Sacramento coming down and taking money back to the Capitol. Those politicians were elected by us, and they were, you know, endorsed and promoted by people within Solano County who are now wanting us to raise our taxes. I really akin it to if your neighbor was broken into, their house was broken into, that would suck. But the next day your neighbor breaks into your house, takes your stuff saying, oh, it's because I was broken into. That's the way I feel. The city was robbed by the state, and so now the city is justifying taking more of my money to cover up the difference. And I completely disagree with that. I think the action we should be taking is going up to Sacramento and finding people who will not only bring home the bacon, but allow us to keep our bacon in our community.
So a third party.
Mm-hmm.
So there's been a lot of talk about that people are sick and tired of what we got.
Mm-hmm.
Keep voting the same way. We're still getting what we got.
Mm-hmm.
So why would a third party make a difference? Wouldn't that dilute the vote? Or?
I think a third party, my first exposure to a third party happened in 1992 when a fellow named Ross Perot was running, formed the Reform Party. I really liked him because he was not the typical bang on a lectern and shout out and requote the same sound bites that everyone else was doing. He would sit there and going, here's the problem, here's a graph that exposes the problem, here's what I want to do. And he got a lot of attention, because he was not quoting and regurgitating catchphrases and stuff like that. His actions and his topics they eventually forced the other two parties to talk about that. I think the role of a third party, as we've seen in the past, it can make or break certain elections. Let's talk about Ralph Nader in Florida in 2000. So it can be a spoiler. My goal for the Libertarian Party in the short run would be, I'm reasonable and realistic. We may not win this year or in 4 years, but if we can get that 10%, if we can be that kingmaker, if the vote is split 45-45 and here's a 10% swing, the two remaining parties are going to have to pay attention. We could have won had we had the Libertarian vote. We can force that conversation, say, hey, here's the 10%. Here, we are the swing vote. You need to start embracing, not us. We're not here to embrace the people. We want people to embrace and breathe and live our message of less government, basic necessities. So that's the short-term goal. But I think long-term, people are going to come around because you hear people clamoring for a third choice. Yet when we mention there's a third choice, I don't want to waste my vote. Well, but your voting logic right now is, quote, the lesser of two evils. When you're voting for the lesser of two evils, you're still voting for evil. It's about time we look at alternative choices. If you were a hiring manager at a small business or at your office and you had a job position listed and you had just 2 applicants and you weren't thrilled with either applicant, you wouldn't just go, well, I guess I got to choose one of them. You would keep looking for other applicants. And I think we need to do that in a political spectrum. Politics and hiring and electing elected officials is a hiring decision. It's not a spectator sport, which I think it's become. I'm voting for the red guy. No, I'm going for the blue guy. We need to take it seriously and say, I'm hiring a person to represent my concerns at various stages of government, and take it as a very important decision. And ask questions and have debates and make responsible decisions. And look outside of our two-party system for the ideal choice candidate.
We've got a situation where a lot of people have lost hope. They say, well, my vote hasn't counted. I voted for 20 years. It's never gone my way. Mm-hmm. With that type of disillusionment, what do you think the Libertarian Party has to offer? What hope do you bring?
I would say that, or as time progresses, in my 20-something years as a, concerned member of the electorate, that the former choice that we had of Republican versus Democrat, that choice really has blurred in my viewpoint. It's now, it's 2 halves of the same problem. In California, it's really very obvious in that, the Republic, we don't even have the illusion of the second choice. We have basically a big blob of Democrats. By choosing a third party, and I'm not saying you should just immediately lockstep vote Libertarian. There's other 3rd, 4th, 5th parties you should explore. You should get off the bench and do your research. I truly feel that if you look at the values that the Libertarian espouses, that it'll sync up with what you as a citizen want to achieve with your life, for your family, for your community, your business, your church, whatever axis you view important in your life. Libertarianism and the mantra of fiscal conservatism and social tolerance, I think, resonates with the average citizen. And as far as the giving up and why bother voting, me and my significant other had this discussion, and I kept on hammering on her. I know you haven't voted in 12 years, but it's very important. Particularly we have our young 3-year-old. It's now important. You're not just voting for you, you're voting for the next generation. You need to think about them. it's something about us, but also what world are we transferring to our offspring, to our next generations? And voting, it's important. It may not go your way all the time, but just like baseball, you can't hit a home run unless you get up to bat. And I think it's important to get off your, put aside the frustration, dig deeper, and do your research and say, you know what, that person, he's not party A or party B, he's party D, I don't care. That's the person I want, because he matches, my belief system, and I want others to know that that's who I want to see, and that philosophy.
So I've got Bill. You have a question.
Yes, I'd like to know how you stand on the death issue in California, especially the death penalty. How is your stance on that?
I think in order to, number one, I'm for it. For people that, are a threat to society, to me, it's not about punishment. It's about preventing recurrence. We need to send a message to our society that says killing people in cold blood is not something we tolerate. And we are so against it that, yes, we're going to take the apparent hypocrisy of taking your life to make a statement about how you shouldn't take lives. As far as the current process within California, I think it's a legal snake pit. It's having too many appeals and extensions, and people who didn't even bother appealing are getting appeals. And when you have people that have sat on death row for 20 years, more people die waiting to be executed than are actually executed in the state of California. To take that one step further, more people die from bee stings or falling downstairs than are executed in our death chambers. And that's why it's so trivial now. People, everyone protests it, but as far as sending the message that killing in cold blood is bad, in order to change that, to make it more poignant, we need to really what's the word I want to use? Clean up that process. I think the process has been biased. My viewpoint is, you've been found guilty in a court of law. You've been sentenced to this. We can do one more check to make sure that there no I's were not dotted and no T's were not crossed. But after that, we need to, and I don't take it casually. It's hard to describe it without, sounding like laissez-faire about it. But it is important, and I think we need to send the message that we're going to have swift and accurate justice. Right now, it's a time suck, it's a money suck, and I would view that having people sit in a cage for 20 years waiting to die is probably more cruel and unusual than the death penalty itself.
Thank you.
Matt.
Healthcare, privilege or right, under the libertarian philosophy?
Define healthcare, because healthcare is a big, ribbon. Some people would say, plastic surgery and stomach reduction is healthcare. Boob enhancements, Viagra and hair implants are healthcare. Others would say, nope, just preventive healthcare, such as checking for screenings and whatnot. I don't think it should be mandated by the government, because I don't think you're going to get optimal service as a consumer of healthcare. When it's a regulation, when it's a mandate, you're going to have people just do the bare minimum to that mandate. And then now you have to fight the government to improve that mandate in order to get the service you want. When it's left to the private citizen to say, I, who have taken care of my body all these years, who avoid smoking and excessive drinking, and I should get this level of health care, and it should not cost me as much as this fellow next door to me who chain smokes and skydives without a parachute and other crazy stuff. So it's I don't say it's a privilege. I don't say it's a right. I think it's a consumer good. It's certainly not a right. These days people are like, oh, this is a right and that's a right. There's not many rights. It's a consumer good, and I think by having it mandated through what we call Obamacare, I don't think you're rewarding and penalizing the behaviors that contribute to needing more of that health care.
The war on terror, the war on poverty, the war on drugs. What's the libertarian stand on that?
So the war on drugs has just been a debacle. It's a failure, particularly marijuana. Marijuana is a Schedule I drug, and it was created as a Schedule I drug 40 years ago by President Nixon, and we've been warring against it for the last 40 years. Are we better off? I mean, I think we're better off getting Fidel Castro out of Cuba over the last 50 years than winning the war against marijuana. Personally, I think as a consumer of protective services from our police and fire, I think there are more important things to have a war on than marijuana. War on missing children, a war on unsolved murders, a war on stolen cars. Let's have those wars first. And when those wars are won, then come talk to me about, hey, can we fight another war? But until that day happens, stop wasting my money and your bandwidth on this silly war. Let's legalize it. And not just because we can tax and stuff like that. I don't care about the taxing part. I care about the freeing up bandwidth to fight actual, non-victimless crime, where there's someone who was actually wronged. The kid, if I call you up and my house is being broken into or my car is getting stolen and the police dispatcher says, sorry, we're tied up arresting little Billy because he has a joint in his pocket, I'm going to get livid. That's not what I subscribe to as a consumer of protective services, what I want my money going to. Okay? So that's that. Now, as far as can we just flip the switch and legalize everything, I wouldn't do that either. I think immediately, as far as the marijuana, right now it's a Schedule I drug. The president has the ability to change that schedule right now. Or the Congress can vote to change that schedule. So I would just float a bill that says, let's make marijuana a Schedule III drug. Because I truly think that marijuana has some medical value, but I want the scientists and doctors to make that call, not law enforcement officials and political hacks who stand to make big money on this war on drugs. Then, once we get information from actual professional scientists and doctors, then we can revisit it and say, you know what, marijuana doesn't actually have a value, let's move it back. Or, hey, there's a lot of value in marijuana, hemp products, let's explore this further. And let's have a rational discussion on this. As far as the war on terror, terror is a strategy. It's not an actual enemy. There's not a country of terror out there. If there's a threat or an invasion to the country, then I think we should use our military to protect ourselves. The National Guard, my viewpoint, is the purpose of the National Guard is to guard this nation, not every other nation. And I'm tired, again, there's my resources being spent on stuff that, number one, it's up to that country 4,000 miles away to take care of themselves. They can do it. If you want to take care of a country, let's start here. Let's take all that money that we used to build a school in Iraq and let's build it in Fairfield. So let's butt out. Because first of all these wars, they're not really technically wars. The last official declared war we've had was in World War II. We have not had an official authorized by Congress war in 70 years. What does that say? And you should know that we've been in Afghanistan for 11 years? Just last week, a fellow died. When we started this war, he was 10 years old. And he died last month in Afghanistan. 21-year-old. What does that say? And that really struck home with me, because now I'm looking at my kid and going, wait a minute, I don't see an end to sight on this war in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, wherever we're going now. And basically, am I raising my son just to be another victim in these wars? So now I've got something personally invested in ending these wars. They have not explained to me what the goal is. What's our exit strategy? What milestone do we hit and we go, oh right, we've done it, we've accomplished our mission, let's get the heck out. To this day, haven't seen it. During the two political conventions last month, not one, no comment whatsoever. It wasn't like, hey, let's get them back. They didn't do that silly dog and pony show. They just, it doesn't even happen. That bugged me. We got people dying one a day over there, and it doesn't even get a mention. That means, A, they're getting numb to it. And when you've got the leaders who are making decisions about sending our resources, including lives over there, and they're numb to it, we've lost control. And we need to reassert that control. So, end in this war on terror. If they want to terrorists attack our country, fine, we'll go get them. We're not going to get in the business of nation building or remodeling the Middle East or whatever. You're the guy that wronged me, you're done. and then hold his corpse up to all his friends and say, this is what happens when you wrong America. Not take out half the country, don't use drones and bomb innocent citizens. You go after the people who actually did the crime. You hold up their corpse and say, this could be you, don't do it.
Brian, you've done a real good job of describing several areas where we could sort of de-escalate government intrusion into our lives. My actual question goes more to the philosophy of libertarianism. So let's say that you have the power. What would an ideal scenario society look like if it was under a libertarian type of a mentality or an idea?
I think you would see more community building, in that with less government, the responsibility to make your community a better place falls back on the people. I think when you have lots of big government and you're paying lots of taxes, you have a tendency to go, well, I paid taxes for that, they're supposed to do that. You walk down the street, you see litter on the street. What do you do with it? You don't pick it up. Why? Because you paid taxes for that. There's someone in the government that's supposed to do that. You walk down the streets, you see panhandlers that, I'm hungry. And if you're feeling generous, you might give them $1 or $2. But does that really solve the problem? If you're truly concerned about that guy who's starving, supposedly, shouldn't you give him a sandwich? Shouldn't you bring him home? But why aren't you? Because government has programs for those people. It's always government supposed to take care of that. And as you see, yeah, government has programs for litter and people and health care and all this stuff, but we still have the problems. Because inherently, government is not wired to solve those problems. The police department are not here to eliminate crime, they're here to fight crime. All these medical researchers, their goal is to research a cure for cancer, not cure cancer. That's the inherent paradox of government. They were created to fix something, but if they fix it, they drive themselves out of business. So if you lived in a less government society, again, I'm not for completely abolishing government. Government has a small list of what they ought to be doing. Right now their list of what they're actually doing is about this long, and I think it's far too long. If you knew that litter wasn't going to get picked up on your street unless you picked it up, now you're engaged. If you have a dispute with your neighbor about chickens or a car with flat tires and stuff, you can't just anonymously call in the government and go, hey, there's a guy with a chicken here. No, you have to go talk to your neighbor and say, hey, friend, we have to live together, and your chicken or your car is really, it's an eyesore, it's bothering me. What can we do? You're now fostering community, and now you're you're empowering the humans to actually form a community. How many people in your neighborhood do you actually talk to and work together to solve issues? That's what really I think is lacking right now. We just basically kick back. I paid my taxes. Government's supposed to do things for me.
Sounds like you're talking about education, that we have not been educated, or we've allowed ourselves to be indoctrinated in more government, bigger government, less responsibility.
Right.
So how do you feel about government involvement in education? Have they done a good job?
No. On two levels. Number one, why do we have so many different levels of education departments? Ron Paul discussed this. He'd get rid of the federal Department of Education, and I agree with that. I would get rid of the State Board of Education. Again, education is a consumer good. You want the best either for you as a, I don't care how old you are, you should continuously want to learn, either on your own by picking up a book or going on the online or whatever, or actually enrolling in a program. But also, for your kids, you want them to have a great education. So you, as a consumer of education, you have the best control over where that education goes and the quality of it when the money's in your hands. Right now, again, government takes your money and then they will deliver an education to you. But once they have their money, your money and my money, they're not motivated to listen to you, the consumer of education. They basically said, this is what we think you should have, take it or leave it. I would, as far as school vouchers, I like that idea. It empowers parents and consumers of education to say, I like program A, but I dislike program B. And in the concept of the free market, program B will either improve itself or it'll go away. when you have when you have parental involvement, both on a monetary level, but also an actual interaction level, I think that's the other half. Again, back to the money. You pay money for school, you sort of, all right, I paid my money, educate me, or educate my son or daughter. Parental involvement, or adult, or whoever involvement, is key in any education. I think that's the other half of the equation that isn't addressed. It's not just a money issue, it's a parental involvement issue. You need to have both of those. And you asked, what would it be like with less government? I think as a family unit, as a head of household, if more of my time is freed up from not having to deal with government compliance or income taxes or other non-value-added government compliance issues, I have more time to get involved in my child's education. I have more time to go down to the park and fix it up. I have more time to help that panhandler down the street by giving him a hot meal tonight. I have those things. Getting government out of the picture frees up your time to do things that are important to you, and inherently in the interests of motivated self-interest, what's important to you will theoretically trickle down to your family, your friends, your neighbors.
Sounds like you're a person who believes that people are basically good.
I believe so. I think, I've been in environments where let's see what happens when you are on your own. If we just, grab a random 100 people and put us, in the middle of the desert, or we put them on another planet and say, okay guys, you're here, how are you going to survive? I think the human nature is to form communities in order to not only just survive, but to flourish and grow and be better than we were yesterday or a month ago. And also for our offspring to be better than we are. It's that natural inclination. And I think government and that constant intervention suppresses that natural human drive.
Matt.
Can you describe briefly the libertarian philosophy of fiscal conservatism and social liberalism?
Okay.
And am I correct in saying that?
I would say fiscal conservative, good, and socially tolerant. So the fiscal conservatism, it's the same fiscal conservatism you practice at home when you're balancing your checkbook. It's like, okay, I'm taking in this much, I'm spending this much. That's not going to work. Unlike government, if my income is less than my outgoing, I can't go to my boss and say, hey, revenue, we have a revenue issue, in order to keep the skill set that I provide you, you're going to need to pay me more. You'll get laughed out the office if you try that with your boss. So when I'm balancing my checkbook, it's what do I cut? Maybe I don't need the premium cable package. I can do with basic cable, or maybe I don't need cable at all. I'll use the internet. My car is starting to get 150,000 miles on it. I would like a new car, but I'm going to hold off, and I'm just going to get the tune-up every 5,000 miles. It's basic, simple things that you do on a personal basis in your household. It's not a bold, exciting new concept. Maybe if you're in government, it is. But for balancing a checkbook, my viewpoint is you can't balance a checkbook. You shouldn't be doing all these other things, and that's really where government stands. They can't balance a checkbook. Well, then you don't get into managing what I do with my body. You don't get into managing who I associate with and how I associate with them. You haven't earned that right, in my opinion. So you learn a basic math skills, then we'll talk about other things. As far as the social tolerance bit, part of the benefit of living in America is that as long as I'm doing stuff that I want to do and I'm not negatively impacting other people who don't want to be impacted, that's fine, and they should respect that. But the other side of the coin is that you can be able to do whatever you want to do, and just as long as it's not negatively impacting me, I need to respect that as well. And it's a two-way street on that. And I think sometimes people forget about that. I've come across people, oh, you want to legalize marijuana? Yes. Oh, but you're for gay marriage. Well, I think people should associate with that. And it's a package deal. It's not a single, libertarianism is not a single issue crusade. It's an umbrella of liberty. And there's many people can stand under that umbrella.
So as libertarianism gets more followers and more fans because of its very popular message, what mechanisms are in place to keep it from being co-opted in much the same way that the Tea Party was co-opted when it started to gain momentum and power?
it's hard to put in mechanisms to prevent that. You know, libertarianism in general is a minimal structural concept, both on just a philosophical approach, but also on a party structure. So in order to prevent it from getting too rigid, you need to be rigid. And it's a paradox. How do we do that? The Libertarian Party itself, the actual party, has been around for 40-something years. It's the third largest party in the country after the Republicans and Democrats. It's been trucking along, and if you've ever witnessed, I encourage people to go Google or YouTube libertarian conventions. It's a far cry from the big two conventions you've seen on TV, where it's basically talking puppets. Yeah, there's the teleprompter, they will read that. The libertarian conventions have been more, very lively discussions about topics like, how do we not become a victim like the Occupy movement or the Tea Party, stuff like that. Honestly, I'll say there is no official policy on how not to get corrupted. But by creating that policy, I think you would create the venue in which you could get corrupted. So it's kind of in order to survive, we're just going to, keep on doing what we're doing.
Good. Well, I just want to thank you for coming out tonight.
Thank you for hosting. I appreciate all the quality questions. If you have any further questions about libertarianism or the Libertarian Party, the website's very easy to remember. It's lp.org. And from there, you can go ahead and, honestly, I encourage everyone to engage. Don't just, look at one site and go, okay, that's nice, and, and then forget about it. Keep on digging. Go through, surf the web, read books. Really get engaged. Even if you don't select the Libertarian Party, at least see what the choices are. You have the Green Party, the Peace and Freedom Party, the Constitution Party. There's other choices than just the big two. And I think, it's imperative as a consumer of government representation that you dig deeper and see what's out there. There's more than just two choices. Be a savvy consumer. Oh, we have a question.
If we were to have a libertarian president, a House full of libertarians, a Senate full of libertarians, what would that government look like?
You would have to have the three houses. You would have to have the president, the Senate, and the House. You would need all three legs of that table to make meaningful change. But I think right off the bat, you would see numerous government departments just eliminated, and basically just starved. We would just not fund them. NEA, both of them. National Endowment for the Arts, National Education Association, they're gone. Ron Paul had this conversation. Department of Commerce. Commerce can regulate itself. We don't need a government agency to regulate commerce. Businesses know how to run businesses. Department of the Interior. What do they do? There's, you would see that. There's been debates. How would the libertarian leadership run? Would they just, people, they were just going to shut down government. I don't think that would happen. I think, if I had the power, you had the power to go, hey, there's a switch in the back of the White House, you just turn it off and government goes away. I think the culture shock to America would be too great. And we would have too much turmoil. And people would go, those damn libertarians. Look at this. And there would be just a desire to go back to the old two-party system. Oh, at least there I had stuff and I knew what was going on and stuff like that. So the culture shock would be too brutal. I think a orderly trimming down, again, we're not about abolishing government, just getting it back to, here's the list of things government should be doing. This is where it is right now. Let's scale back that list. And again, we phase it out over 4 years. Okay, this year we're going to cut off a couple. Get that low-hanging fruit where there's no value. Right off the bat, I can guarantee you a libertarian president would issue an executive order to, A, bring all the troops back from Afghanistan, Iraq, blah, blah, blah. Because they were sent over there on an executive order, fine. It took them 30 days to get over there. They can get back in 28 days. Boom, right off the top. That would be the first 24 hours done right there. Secondly, I think getting rid of all the other executive orders would be in process. There's so many policies and systems and programs and departments that have been created because of executive orders, not because of the people clamored for it and the Congress approved it. All those go goodbye. Agenda 21, I'm sure some people have heard of Agenda 21. That's implemented by executive order. Congress never approved it. Get rid of that. So you would just see so many things get tossed, and you'd see a lot of complaints because there's a lot of people, both in government and outside of government, who have, that's their profit. They've gotten their $100,000 a year jobs being the senior co-administrator director of some obscure division, or there's some small business guy who basically lives off the government teat because he got a sweetheart deal to, he's the only guy that sells chromed copper tubing to some obscure government agency. So you're going to hear a lot of people complaining about that because there goes their golden goose. But you're going to see it. What you're going to realize as a consumer, as a citizen, wow, look at all that government stuff that we didn't need. And now we have those resources back to the government agencies that we do want. Even breaking it down to a civic level. Fairfield, oh, we don't have enough money for police and fire. Well, we have enough money to own 2 golf courses. Why don't we sell off those golf courses? There's some money we could use for police and fire. We have all these fancy trucks and stuff like that. Do we need all the trucks? Well, why don't we sell off some of those trucks? And there's some more money for police and fire and libraries and schools. It's I think having a third set of eyes looking at things, they'll find new sources of revenue. They'll really put a spotlight on what the people view as important roles of government.
Good. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.